So the plan is to turn this little box trailer into this. So as you can see, it's a pretty small little trailer. It's only going to be kind of like a little micro camper when it's all done. So before we get started, I think it might be worth noting that I have no experience working with trailers or metal or building camp trailers or anything mechanical. I have done a couple of years of a carpentry apprenticeship over 20 years ago. So if this thing turns out to be a big hunk of crap, then we know why.
I think we should give this beauty a name.
The big turd.
The big rolling turd.
See if we can make some cash. Building this into a Airbnb style micro camper. So I just started by removing the number plate as well as the little light that goes over the number plate, which I'll be getting a new one of those later. Then I went into removing the tail lights. They both didn't come off all that easily, so I just cut them off in the end because I'm getting new ones of this anyway. So they can come off in one bit. Then I just started hacking off some of the bits that I thought that I wouldn't need. This was definitely one of them, these little tailgates. Super impressed with that, aren't you? I've cut off these tailgates mainly because they were in the way, but also they're really heavy, and you can see just by picking it up how heavy it was.
Oh, I see.
So save a whole heap of weight in that. Now I'm just pulling off the bottom plywood that the person put on. They sort of just bolted it to the frame over the top of some of the metal sheet that's underneath. It's really rusted out around the sides. So it was kind of just like a little cover up, I guess, so that they could use the trailer, which is cool. I mean, he did tell me that when I bought the trailer. I knew what was underneath. He did say that that was what he did. That is what he did. That is what he had done. And you can see under there all the rust. But he put a whole heap of caulking in there to try and stop the water from getting past the plywood to the metal. It didn't really work. Lots of rust under there, so I've just decided to cut out the entire bottom of the trailer. This one big sheet of metal I wanted to remove. It was basically useless. There's holes all through it. As you can see here down the side, it's just one big piece of metal in the middle with holes all around the outside. So I've just gone around the entire outside of the trailer and just cut it all. Pulled that out and cleaned up around the edges of the frame as well. And now I've just decided to cut the tops of these trailer sides off. So, if that makes sense, the tops of the trailer sides.
Not really, no.
So, I'm cutting around the fender as closely as I can to try and kind of preserve the fender. So I want to cut down the weight of this trailer as much as I possibly can. And I know that the side parts are really going to be adding a lot of weight, so I really wanted to try and preserve the fender and cut around here as precisely as I could to try and make that happen. And just got a nice little thin grinding bit to do that. And just marked out where the fenders met the inside by cutting through and then joined the dots.
A sixth grader could connect the dots.
That top edge is really thick actually. When you get to the top there, it was a bit harder to go through that top edge, but yeah, I was cutting along that top edge there. It was pretty thick. I've noticed up in this rail here on the back side of the fenders there's quite a bit of rust there, so it's gonna get broken anyway at some point. So I'm gonna cut everything off, new plan, clean slate.
The program, the clean slate.
Amazing how these plans evolve as you just get into the project, but cut everything off. I'll build boxes over the wheels later and waterproof everything. Okay, that's the plan. Let's get rid of all this stuff. So I just went back through with the grinder and I cut using the frame as a guide and essentially just cut that entire side off the top of the frame, including the fenders as well. And actually I'm glad I did because there was quite a lot of... Oh, you're super pumped with that, aren't you?
I'm impressed.
There was quite a lot of weight in these sides, and I'm really glad I pulled it all off in the end. As you can see, we've got this trailer stripped back down to the bare bones in the mud. As you can see, it's been raining a lot. Now you can see a lot of this surface rust here that's been built up. So I've used this wire disc on the grinder and just made short work of it. This disc worked really well. It cut through a lot of the excess paint that was on there that was flaking, and the rust worked really well, as you can see. So the beams here, they do have a little bit of pitting going on where the rust is sort of eaten down a little bit. So I'm trying to grind back with this sort of thicker flat disc and get it down to as close to the bare metal as I possibly can. And then I'll use that wire bit or brush or whatever you want to call it on the end and try and dig into some of this pitting. And then when we seal it up, hopefully it won't get any worse.
I hope so.
So this bit was something that did take quite some time. I wanted to try and get this right because obviously the whole camper is going to sit on top of all of these frames, but you can see it started to come good after I spent some time on it. But it did take some time to get down to sort of bare metal. I think they've treated this with some rust treatment before, and some of the rusted metal from the sheet floor had kind of turned back into a metal above the line of the frame itself.
How is that possible?
So it took a little bit of time to get back down to the right level. Then I used this wire brush on the drill, get right in those corners there.
That's it, boy. Get in there nice and deep like.
Get out as much as we possibly could of that rust out of there and the dirt and grime. Flip the trailer up. Amazing how light the trailer is now without all those sides, the floor and everything. So that made a big difference. So all of the prep work's done. I've grinded everything back to almost bare metal, got rid of all of the flaky rust, and in these pitting here I've managed to get a lot of the rust out of that as well. So next step, I'll be using pentarol to cover up all of the bare metal and any of the little rust spots that are there. This product will form those back into metal apparently. Hopefully that'll stop the rust from spreading. It can get into all little gaps and essentially stop any oxygen getting in and letting that rust continue. So thanks, Cockatoo. He believes me. What the fuck? So I'm going to cover the whole area that I've ground.
What did you say?
Ground with this, and then after that I can go over and give it a nice good coat of or couple of coats of paint. Alright, so I used this pentarol product, just covered the entire frame that I'd got back down to mostly metal as far as I could in most places. Then I gave it a couple of coats of that, which we didn't see, but I then went over it and did the paint, which was a engine paint. I've got a nice freshly coated frame to start building the micro camper on top of. I've used this engine enamel, which is, you know, if it's good for an engine, I'm pretty sure it's going to last on a trailer. I don't know that much about paints or trailers or metal for that matter, but if it's going to last on an engine, I think it's going to last pretty well long term on this. So the next step is to put some galvanized beams on top of this steel frame. I want to make it a little bit more flat overall. Some of these surfaces are lower than others with the beams, so I want to add them on so they come out to where the wheels are and make a nice flat surface, because before the trailer didn't come out past the wheels, the fenders just came out over them.
Oh, really?
So I need to bring the platform out a bit further, and I'm going to do that through galvanized beams. So as you can see, the frame doesn't come out quite as far as it needs to around the wheels, so that's why I'm adding the galvanized beams and to make the whole surface flatter. And the main reason for that is those middle beams don't come up to meet the same height as the side beams, so we want one big flat surface in the end. As you can see, the frame turned out pretty good with those few coats of paint.
Oh, you know something that is nice.
Nice and solid now. Now I've got the galvanized beams, starting to mark those off and use my metal cut-off saw here to cut them to the right size. I actually did two long lengths in the center of the trailer, and you can see there I'm just starting to clean up those rough edges over the ends there, because once you use the drop-off saw it kind of leaves this bird edge, so I've been using a little grinder to clean that up and spray it with the pentarol. So anything that I cut, even if I don't show it here, I've been spraying it with that pentarol so it doesn't rust again. Obviously any cut edges on these galvanized beams will start to rust. But I'm putting two down the center here, and I'm going to add some other ones coming off the sides here. I'm measuring those up there now, just to come out as far as the wheel, or kind of almost as far as the wheel. I have a little, another little bracket that comes off the bottom of these little pieces that I'm cutting here now to hold the wall up. So the walls get bolted onto those little end bits, as you can see here. I will add them on, but you can sort of see how the frame is coming together here. I have all these little side pieces that come off those main two central beams. So cutting a few more of those for the other side, cleaning them up. Alright, last one, you can see where they're going to go. I'm just laying them out here now, and I'm going to have one long bit on the end. You can see I'm sort of sizing that up there, making sure it's the same size. I've bolted it on there at the end, you can see that there. I didn't show that, but it was raining at the time.
Well, isn't that convenient for you?
Bolting on the other end piece, the other end beam, with these little brackets and some metal tapping screws are all galvanized. Everything I'm using is galvanized in this process, so we don't get any rusting in the new trailer, in the new beams and structure. So yeah, putting those beams together using those self-tappers and galvanized angle brackets. Then I added on these little brackets on the ends. I think my camera might have cut out here, so you can't quite see that, but you can see towards the left hand side of the screen on the end, you can see those brackets. I've already put those on. Now it's just a matter of measuring these out into the right place and attaching the side beams onto the frame itself, and also those central beams along the middle. And you can see I'm adding a galvanized bracket that attaches with nice strong galvanized nuts and bolts to the ends of these side joists, I guess you'd call them, or side beams. So adding those on, and this one is as close to the wheel as I could get, because obviously I need to leave room for a box to go over it as a fender, and I will cut all that to size later on. So more nuts and bolts, more galvanized brackets. This is basically a process for a few more beams along the sides here. You can see just measuring them out so they're all as square as they possibly can be. I mean, the trailer is a homemade trailer to be honest, so the guy I bought it off, he made it himself quite a few years ago. So not everything is completely square. I've done my best to try and keep this frame as square as I can to the one that was underneath it, and yeah, it's not as square as I would have liked it to be, but I'll work with it. Adding the last few side beams on, and nice little hammer with my drill there. Who needs a hammer when you've got a battery? Attaching the last one, you can see that little arrow thing that I'm using. That's actually a welding bracket. I actually don't know the name of that tool, but I bought that the other day. It was pretty cheap, $7. It just sort of holds both the metal in place. All right, all the galvanized beams are on with these little lugs that hang out a little bit, which are actually going to support the wall. And the wall are like cool room panels, which I got pretty cheap. It's aluminium on the outside, styrofoam in the middle, aluminium on the other side. So I've got a finished wall on one side and a finished wall on the other. So outside and the inside will have that nice white aluminium on the entire wall. So that's cool. That's where that sits. So next step is to put on the plywood floor, which is exciting. I'm going to be using this kind of marine ply. It does have like a water resistant coating on it, but it's not completely waterproof. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to waterproof the entire underside of the trailer with some, Flex Seal, I guess you call it. In America they call it Flex Seal. I can't remember exactly what it's called here, but it's like a rubberized waterproofing membrane that goes on the underside of this. So that's the next step.